Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start. My name is Keith Alcorn. I've been in the film business, I don't know, since the early 80s, primarily focusing on animation, but I saw this opportunity to work on my first documentary with Steve. Steve, actually, when I got in this business, was the guy who helped me get my start. Mm-hmm. And so it was great fun to get to work with him again. But like I said, most of my work has been in animation. I've done work with film, television, Christmas specials, I don't know, all sorts of stuff. But that's primarily my background.
Hello everyone, I'm Steve Barnes, and as Keith said a moment ago, he and we go back a ways. I think we probably originally worked with each other 32 years ago, if you can imagine that. Most of you probably weren't born yet at that time. But we go back a ways, and kind of, had a lot of fun for a lot of years in the animation department. I actually taught this young man how to run those big giant Oxbury cameras. Has anybody ever seen one of those? They look like dinosaurs. They're black and giant and really hard to run. But anyway, that's what we did for a number of years together and kind of went our own ways. He went off and did Jimmy Neutron and several other things while I went off to school teaching, which is kind of what I'm doing these days. And I try to practice what I preach. I teach the very things that we did for this movie. I teach graphic animation. I teach 2D animation. I'll teach you just about anything you want to know, by the way. But anyway, we had a chance. We actually ran into each other through a student. A student was working with that was in my class and kind of hooked us up again. We kind of went from there.
Cool. Okay.
So how do we start?
Yeah. So please tell us the genesis of this and how it goes back to high school, even for you, Keith.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, sure it does. What's funny is we did this film under the film name, the company name, Black and Gold Films, because as it turns out, many of us actually attended Irving High School. And Steve went to Irving High School. I went to Irving High School. Jimmy Papa, who is in the film, he went to Irving High School. Our audio engineer went to Irving High School. I mean, it's just the list goes on, and it was never an intentional thing. It's just we all just happened to go there, and so that's where the Black and Gold Films.
And we were drummers too. I got to say,
yeah,
we were all drummers in the school orchestra.
Yeah. But we all went to school at the different. I mean, I never knew Steve in high school. He was a little bit
of many years.
And then, but. That's where that came from. But then I got to know Jimmy Papa years ago, and just developed a friendship with him. And over the course of that time, learned about his involvement with the Freebirds. And I was a huge wrestling fan growing up. Loved the Von Erichs, hated the Freebirds, as we were all supposed to do. And but hated those guys. And then when I found out he was one of the songwriters and players on Badstreet and the producer of the video, and then I realized, oh, you know what? In a few years, you got an anniversary coming up. It's going to be the 30th anniversary of this song that really started that whole rock and wrestling genre, and gave wrestlers the opportunity to have their own entrance music. So. We just kept talking about it. We talked about it for about 4 or 5 years. And then finally, just all the stars lined up and everything fell into place, and we were able to make this documentary.
So where was it, how did people come out before rock and wrestling became a thing?
Well, before, as you know, and I know you guys are big wrestling fans. I know you guys are big wrestling fans, and they would come out, like the Von Erichs would come out to LaGrange, or Kerry Von Erich would come out to Tom Sawyer, or the Freebirds would come out to Freebird by Leonard Skinner, or I've even seen them come out to Georgia by Willie Nelson, which is
Right.
awful.
I
I mean, you're not building any pop with Georgia from Willie Nelson.
mean, a good song, but not necessarily a wrestling intro. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know,
Hey, I just moved from Austin. Let's not get into Willie.
No, I like
no,
Willie.
I like
Let me go on
Willie.
record
It's
here.
just that's not going to generate much of a pop from the crowd. You know, this ballad about Georgia, and so anyway, and then the music industry started going, hey, wait a minute, you guys aren't paying us anything to use our music on your telecasts. And so you need to go ahead and stop that now. And you know, then, you know, I mean, it's kind of awful to watch a wrestler come out to nothing. You're just the announcer going, you know, and here's David Von Erich. And so, you know, they started, you know, with the Freebirds, everybody started developing their own theme song.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the idea of having Michael sing his own theme song?
Well, it was a horrible idea.
If you watch our movie, you'll get to hear Michael's real voice.
Yeah, what's really funny? I mean, he's not a singer, obviously, and but we do have footage of him in the film, actual footage of him taking voice lessons, which is enchanting. and he, you know, he's just. But he's such a great character, and he's, you know, so, and it actually, when he became a singer, it actually allowed him to turn face, and he became a baby face, and you know, girls started loving him, and instead of everyone hating him, and it was really odd. And then he's, you know, making friends with the Von Erichs, and it just destroyed that rivalry.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow.
I suspect, see, he met, when Jimmy got involved in Michael's life, and they started talking about the idea of a song. My guess is that with Michael's ego, you know, he keeps it well in check, very well in check.
Yeah, you think.
But with Michael's ego, I would suspect that it was almost a given that he'd be singing this song. And in fact, they wrote it together.
Yeah, they did write it together.
Yeah,
And
they
in
wrote
all
it together.
fairness to him, I mean, I can't imagine the song being treated any other way. I mean, it's kind of one of those. I mean, I can't imagine Perry Como doing that. Although I would love to hear it.
Well, we do a version at the end that Perry could have sung.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have a lounge version of it at the end.
I got a question. This is before iTunes 30 years ago and all that. Was the song itself actually released on like vinyl and stuff?
Yeah, it really was, and it was.
45s, or was it the whole album?
Well, at
45.
first it was just the 45 on the A side, and on the B side it was the instrumental version. Because I guess they just couldn't.
Just sing along.
They only had one song at the time.
Yeah, they only had the one, so it's like, oh, hey, here's an idea.
You also been in karaoke. That's it.
Yes, and the internet.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, but then it was probably about, I don't know, 3 years later, they came out with an album, and there was just 11 other songs, Michael singing, and he actually did. I think he did get better. He also had the help of some real background vocalists and stuff like that. But it was
and good musicians. I mean, the group had really good musicians.
Yeah, I mean, there were guys that played with other real bands, like Leonard Skinner or, bless you, people like that.
But again, this is before the internet, and so it's before.
Yeah, I mean, he was selling these.
How did they?
He
get
sold
it
a
out
mail order. I mean, he put ads in wrestling magazines, and he made a nice living.
He made a gob of money, actually.
Yeah, he really did.
And actually did mail order out of his own house, actually.
Yeah, he was shipping stuff out of his house, and
Can you believe that? And he put his real phone number on TV, and he'd get calls day and night for this thing.
yeah, he did. People would call and want to come over and just get a T-shirt, like he was he was a retail store.
And by the way, I got to say this, 30 years later, he tried to put his real phone number on this advertising. We said, Jimmy, don't do it.
One thing I like when you guys talk about, and you talked about this on the podcast, but
This is a documentary, but the style of the documentary is not what you would normally see.
Absolutely.
Where it's approached from not maybe as serious of a standpoint.
Well, yeah, I mean, Steve and I, when we get together, I mean, we always are, I mean, it's sometimes hard for other people, like if there's a third person, to be around us because we're just, I don't know, uncomfortably silly at times, and we know what we're talking about, but sometimes another person will go, what are you guys
What are you
laughing
doing?
at?
Can you stop that now?
Yeah, and so, you know, it's just, when you combine rock and roll and wrestling, I just couldn't imagine really taking this too seriously to begin with. I mean, if this was, you know, the Owen Hart tragedy or something like that, well, then you of course take it
Absolutely.
a different approach to it. But with rock and wrestling, and especially this guy as the singing wrestler, I don't know how you take it any other way. And there was too much material that was funny to us.
Yeah.
To really take an approach that, well, you know, this is really a milestone in wrestling.
And Jimmy,
Sequin rebel flag tape.
Oh no!
they painted their face.
They even paint their face with the Confederate flag, and
it's crazy.
it's so weird
It
to
was a
think
different
that
time.
wasn't that long ago.
I know.
I mean, I remember it well, and thinking at the time, wow, that's maybe not the best taste. I mean.
Especially when you consider where the sportatorium was located.
I know. Probably not a genius idea, really, when you think about it.
You need a firebomb before it got torn down.
And then our other main character, Jimmy, of course, there's Larry too, who was mysteriously not there. But the three characters, two of which are Michael and Jimmy, are both, I don't know how to put it, but they're both comical in their own right. I mean, Michael's an over-the-top personality, obviously, and a camera hog. I don't know if you've noticed, but he's always looked, I swear to you, he was posing constantly. We had no trouble finding shots of Michael.
He was photobombing before photobombing.
Yeah, he was.
Even at his wedding, I noticed the wedding footage, he would grab his wife,
and
throw her
sling
out of the
her out
way,
of the frame.
so he could get his face on camera. I'm not kidding you.
But he always made sure that he was facing camera, and he's dancing with her, and her back is to camera all the time. And like, wow, this is incredible.
So-
This guy's amazing.
So he was, I mean, he set up the comedy for us, really, in that way, 30 years ago.
And then, you know, I had years of Jimmy telling us stories.
Oh my gosh.
About, you know, he and the Freebirds, or he and Sunshine, or he and, you know, somebody. The Freebirds get arrested, or the Freebirds peed on him, or
We cut that one out because we were trying to
we
keep
cut it out.
We were trying to keep the rating, to where children could see
Yeah,
the
we're
movie.
trying to be family friendly.
That is a real story.
But it really is a real story, how they did that. And it was a pretty amazing story.
So he set up. So Jimmy, obviously, as I hope you've had a chance to see the movie, but we allow him to be the comic character that he is. How can I put it? So I mean, it would have been hard to make this a serious documentary. Although we did discuss it, believe it or not, when going into this thing, we talked about what approach should we do, and we looked at both sides, but comedy kept winning.
How did you guys decide on Troy for your narration?
Well, Keith knew Troy.
Yeah, I've known Troy for a while, and I've always wanted to find the right thing to work to bring him in on, and he's just got this wonderful, deep, rich, chocolatey voice of God voice, and that's just his normal voice, just saying hi, how are you? and I would try to explain his voice to people, and I couldn't even go there. I couldn't go as low as he goes, and you know, and he's such a funny guy anyway. Troy is amazingly funny, and he would come in. We'd do several voiceover sessions. And I'd give him the script, and he'd do it as written, and then it'd be like, okay, Troy, what would you do? And we ended up using a lot of his stuff because it was so funny.
Yeah, he's great ad lib.
Oh, and he would just like ad lib right there. And and Jimmy at one point, I remember. Do you remember this when he wanted all those promos? And And Troy's like, you don't
Oh,
have
yeah.
anything written for me. And Jimmy's like, well, just wing it. And he winged it for like 10 minutes.
And we were
just
like-
all these great promos.
He really did that. For all of a sudden, Jimmy's marketing head kicked in. He was thinking about selling stuff out of his own house again.
Yeah,
and
out
he
of
wanted.
his-
And he asked Troy to step in there and do some promos for him, and we were all looking at each other like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, we haven't written anything for him, and so he just winged it, and he was great.
He was great. I got to admit, we were
I
all.
mean, he's really like having a writing partner, but he's got this great voice. Yes,
I have
sir.
a quick question. Where did you find all your archival material? Because I know back in the day when you had the wrestling territories, you would film something at the Sportatorium, and then that tape would be dubbed, and
Yep.
it might be taken down to Houston, and that tape would go to Nashville, and that tape would. How did you find? Because a lot of the wrestling was on a lot of VHS stations. And
Yes.
A lot of VH stations over the last 10 years have been dumping all their tapes. So where did you find all that archival material?
Well, the footage from the GWF we got from Gray Pearson, who was the first person we interviewed. He was the owner and operator of the Global Wrestling Federation.
He's kept an archive.
And
going.
he had all those tapes just on Beta SP. So it was like, can we borrow those? And he was like, sure, and here's a deck, and here's all this stuff.
And then,
It was
and he
like
did.
falling into a gold mine.
And then Jimmy has, I don't know, I don't know how to describe him other than like, well, one way I'll describe him is he's a pack rat. He's got boxes of stuff that he's kept in all these years. I don't know, I think he always thought he was going to do something like this one day, but I swear, if he wouldn't have met us, he would not have done something like this one day. But he has boxes of, we will say to him, do you have some tapes? Oh yeah, those 15 boxes over there are tapes. Just go ahead and look.
Yeah, just go through all of them.
Yeah.
And they're big boxes, and you don't even know where to start. And some of them are home movies, and some of them, and the same thing with a lot of the photographs. I mean, he just has boxes and boxes and boxes of photographs, and he even has. This was so funny. It's only it may only be funny to us, but because we lived through this. But he had all these home movies of the Von Erichs in his safe.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I don't know why you have them in your safe, but can we see them? He's like, yeah, and he went off and disappeared for a while, and then are you in the safe? Are you okay? Well, we didn't know he got locked in or something, and he's like, he finally came back with the guitar that knocked Michael Hayes out in that portion of the film. He came back, look what I found. Are those tapes of the Von Erichs? Because it looks like a guitar. And then he's like, oh yeah, I need to go back and go get that. And then he's like, came back and, do you have the tapes? And he's like, I seem to have misplaced the key. He couldn't find the key.
He hasn't been able to get in his safe.
Yeah,
I don't even know since
I think
then.
he finally
Well,
got
maybe he
something. He finally got in. I don't know what, he blew it up or something.
One time he walked out with some cowboy boots. I mean, this closet must have everything. By the way,
Cowboy boot, and he has a jacket of the Freebirds. one
yeah,
of those
he's got
Confederate jackets.
their clothing is hanging in his closet.
Yes.
I'm not kidding you.
Well, he managed them for a while because he would even drive them to shows. They didn't have a car sometimes. The Freebirds, you'd think, well, these guys got to be rich, beyond imagination, and they were absolutely not. He said one of his stories that we didn't use was going over to their house, their apartment. They all lived together when they were in town together. There would be an orange extension cord hanging from upstairs down to their door and inside the door because they forgot to pay their bills.
So
And
had no
they would,
electricity.
borrow electricity from their upstairs neighbor. And like, these are the Freebirds. Are you kidding me? These guys got to be making, some nice money
They
for
had to have been.
back in the '80s. I mean, especially.
The sad thing is the promoters back then got such a huge chunk of everything
I'm sure they did.
that, you talk to some of these wrestlers, and you got to talk to a lot of, it's.
But I know what Iceman King Parsons made. I mean,
He did pretty well.
he was making pretty good money while he was, in WCC.
Probably didn't help.
The what?
Extracurricular.
Oh no, because they I think they built a Christmas tree out of Jack Daniel's bottles one year,
Can you
and
believe
Jimmy
that?
was just amazed. He wished he had a picture of it, but
Yeah.
for some reason he didn't have a picture of that. He had a picture of everything else. Everything else.
He's even got a pair.
It wouldn't have been in focus anyway.
You have a point. You should have seen some of these photos. But he has a pair of Michael Hayes cowboy boots. Even I had the feeling Michael was his hero along the way. Definitely, but they were roommates for 8 years. By the way, you believe that?
Wow.
Until Michael got married.
Yeah. And then even still, no. But their relationship was, I don't know, it was really odd. I mean, there's nothing.
I don't think there was any hanky panky.
I don't think so. But it was just a very odd relationship between those guys because, I can imagine living with Michael Hayes for a day. I'd rather spend the night in a haunted house.
My sense is that he was the dominant character.
Yeah, because Jimmy's like 4'11" or something.
Yeah, kind of a little Jerry Lewis type guy. You know what I mean?
I got a question. What's the most surprising thing you learned about the wrestling business, or Hayes, or Jimmy, from doing this documentary? What's the big something that just blew your mind because of making this documentary you never knew before?
Well, I mean, for me, the thing that was probably the most surprising was the least funny. I mean, and I think I remember telling you guys this story. Gray Pearson, when he owned the Global Wrestling Federation, he put on a benefit event for Kerry's daughters. Kerry Von Erich had just committed suicide, really left his daughters nothing. And so he got all these wrestlers to come in. They all paid their own way to fly in, wrestled for nothing. All the money goes to Kerry's daughters. And I thought, wow. I mean,
yeah, that was nice.
That was amazingly nice.
Yeah.
I mean, to do something like that, because that cost them. I mean, if nothing else, it cost them, plane tickets and
Absolutely.
room and board and all that stuff. And to know that an entire evening's worth of wrestling was handled that way, it just shows you what a tight fraternity it really is, which I thought was great.
And I think I'll just quickly add something to it, but something that I didn't know about until I got so involved with this story that Michael and Jimmy, and it's in the movie, but had an opportunity to sign like a gigantic $1 million type contract, and Michael was well on his way to actually being almost a Hulk Hogan. He was going to carry in Cyndi Lauper at the Grammys that year. That was going to be his job. But in the end, Michael, it was like a story about a rise to fame and then a fall from grace. I mean, there's a moment in there like that, because when he was up there in that spotlight, the only thing I can figure is he buckled. He couldn't take the heat, and he said, "No, I'm out. I'm not signing this deal." He was already set up to carry in. Hulk Hogan carried Cyndi Lauper in that year, but that was going to be Michael Hayes. But he buckled. So, frankly, I found that unbelievably strange and hard to, and still, to me, it's odd.
Yeah,
it's so
you wonder, well, was this just a fear of success, or he claimed that the WWF wasn't treating them the way they felt they should be treated, and is that really the case, or is it just a case of a guy panicking because he doesn't think he's got what it takes to be the WWF champion, and that's where he was going to go.
Yeah, he would have been the world champion.
His lot in life would have been hugely different, but 12 hours before signing that contract, he backed out. And, it's just amazing.
It's a wild story. To me, that's one of the climax of the movie, right there.
And, Jimmy was going to produce this album with Rick Derringer, and there all these things were going to happen that were huge for all of them. And he just walked away from it, went to Japan for 30 days and wrestled over there. And then when he came back, Jimmy and he kind of picked up and tried to keep things going.
But it was definitely different from then because they no longer had that giant spotlight that was happening. But a wild story, really. I mean, I didn't know those parts of it at all until I got so involved in the research with these guys. But one of those falls from grace is what it looked like to me.
One of the things that I really took, I was a pretty young kid when this whole wrestling stuff went on, and it wasn't until I revisited wrestling from my theater arts instructor in high school that he was just such a wrestling fan, and you had to kind of learn a little bit about wrestling just to get in on his good graces.
Certainly.
But is that I did take away from y'all's documentary was the fact that even though on the stage they have this one persona, that these guys, it didn't matter what, they were all such close friends off the mat, so to speak.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit about that and the differences between the characterizations and how they had a persona that was here, but then it all got set aside when they were friends?
Yeah, it's funny with the Freebirds. They were more what you see is what you get. I mean, they were very much like their characters. They were very tight. I mean, they when they said, we're brothers and all that, they really were like brothers. They did everything together. And as Jimmy can attest to, he's told me so many stories. And I mean, they really kind of were that way, although, they didn't really hate the Von Erichs, and they didn't really, they all kind of hung out. There's a great story that Iceman King Parsons told us. Remember his first night? His first night there, he's wrestling with somebody, and they took him backstage, and they were just flipped over him. Everybody loved him, even the Freebirds and the Von Erichs and Fritz, and everybody just like, usually it takes 3 to 6 months for somebody to go over in a territory. You did it overnight, and they just couldn't wait to sign him. But it was just funny because he was back in the showers with the Freebirds, and they're pouring alcohol on him, and he didn't drink, really, but he did that night. And just how, wild and kooky those guys really, really were. I mean, there was their on-camera persona, but, I did see some home movies of Michael, where, he's just like in Hawaii with Jimmy and things like that. And he's still Michael Hayes. I mean, he tones it down a little bit, but he's still who he is. I mean, that's...
And and like Keith said, since I had a chance to see so many photographs from that period of time, that Jimmy's house, oddly enough, was kind of a hangout for these guys. Since Michael Hayes was living there, anybody might show up there. And sometimes it was the Von Erichs. I mean, their supposed arch rivals would come over and party with them, off camera. But they definitely partied. That part was real.
Yeah, all the time.
And then some big rock and roll famous stars would stop by.
I mean, people like, Greg Allman and, I can't even... Jimmy told the story about the night that they hung out with David Lee Roth. And,
exactly.
All these crazy stories. But a lot of these guys, a lot of these rock and roll guys were wrestling fans too. They just...
Well, definitely. Yeah, partiers, big time.
And,
The theater on both sides.
Yeah.
yes.
Definitely
yeah.
theater.
You had even back in those days, you had the heels and the faces had their own locker rooms. They couldn't even be seen on premises.
That's true.
Mingling together because the curtain hadn't been back.
Right.
Yeah. And they had their own autograph tables and all that, separated from two sides of the building.
And that was kind of, I think, one of the problems with that Sunshine story when she showed up the day they were shooting the Badstreet video. She at the time, I think she was the valet for Chris Adams or something, or somebody like that, and so she couldn't really be anywhere near the Freebirds, and so Jimmy had to go tell her that, and it made her furious because she was already mad at him anyway, but
I can't figure out why.
yeah, I can't even.
We know him quite well.
Yeah, but I mean, he goes back there and tells her, "You're going to have to go on the other side, and you can't be here. And she just knocked the crap out of him.
She beat him up.
She beat him up pretty good. And so much so that security had to be called. And
we had that in the movie.
we had it in the movie, but then Jimmy thought, well, I don't want to
Hurt her feelings.
Yeah, I don't want to hurt her feelings.
Even
so-
though she beat him up. But
Yeah, she won. It's not, like she's gonna.
in fact, we reenacted it. You see,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that it didn't make the movie, but we didn't want we couldn't cast the right characters. We couldn't find the right faces, so we did it with puppets. Actually, I wish you could have seen it. It'll be on the second disc.
I hope.
There is a second disc.
Because
By the way, there's supposed to be a second disc.
Jimmy begged us not to do that because he still talks to Sunshine from time to time,
Right.
And he was just afraid because I don't know why. I guess that was a real dark period in her life. She threw everything she had wrestling related away.
She's out
She
of
has
business.
nothing.
Yeah.
And she doesn't do any interviews. She doesn't talk to anybody. We tried to get her for this. It's just so she could help us really, tell that story because it was such a funny story to hear Jimmy tell it. And but he talked to her several times and never asked her to be in it. So.
What about some of the other subjects when you approached them for interviews? What was the general response? Were they open to it? Or?
Yeah, I mean, everyone that we interviewed seemed, they seemed willing to talk about just about anything, as long as it wasn't steroid related or something like that.
And we tried, but we had a few other dreams in mind that didn't quite happen. Like, we did try to get Kevin Von Erich, but that didn't quite work out. I mean, you always reach as far as you can in this kind of thing. But our people did talk to his people. We made a little progress, but we didn't ever get it to where we really needed it to be. And we couldn't find Michael, by the way.
No, we still can't.
Yeah, we can. That's true. We've looked for Michael. We don't know where he is because he's not at work anymore.
Could you, for people that are going to be viewing this outside of, Dallas or the South, could you talk about how important the Freebirds were? Because they were really important to Southern wrestling. And could you talk about the territories and the importance of this sportatorium and stuff like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Freebirds, they started in, I guess, the Georgia Wrestling GWA, was that what it was called?
GCW, Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Okay. And that's the first time I remember seeing them. I mean, it was Michael Hayes without a beard and a mustache and all that. So, I wish we'd had an opportunity to interview Michael because, I would love to know more about, what brought them here. And when they first came here, they were actually friends of the Von Erichs. And there was one incident that they turned on when they hit Kerry in the head with the gate of during a cage match, and that turned them heel. But the Sportatorium was a landmark. I mean, it was one of the premier places in wrestling anywhere. At that time, I just remember it just doesn't seem like, if the Sportatorium, it may have been the second largest, the WCCW might have been second largest alliance in the country. They had great talent, and it was all right here. It's funny because I don't think Steve and I worked together during this time, but I don't think he ever went with us. A bunch of my animator buddies and we would all go to the Sportatorium every Friday night. We'd go, and it's just so funny because to watch it on television is one thing. To watch it live and see all the things that happen that you don't necessarily see on television was amazing. I can't tell you how many times I saw a wrestler just pound the high holy out of some fan who jumped in the ring. It happened a lot more than television would lead you to believe. And, you know, some guy, I remember a guy sitting right in front of me, and he's like, you know, I don't know, 110 pounds, and most of it was beer, and he runs up there, and he jumps up on the ring, and the wrestler just turns around and pounds him so bad, he just turns to liquid, and he just falls on the apron, and the security guards scoop him up and take him out. But, man, it was so amazing, and to get to go there, we were even there the night that David Von Erich died. And David Manning, who we did get to interview, he had to make that announcement that David Von Erich had passed away in Japan. And, you know, it was like the weirdest thing, because suddenly, oh, wait, these are real people. You know, the theater and the fun and all that is kind of dissolved away, and you saw that, oh, no, this is, you know, I had no idea that tragedy would continue like it did, of course, but wow, I mean, it was an amazing night, and I think we ended up leaving, but, you know, the Sportatorium was huge, and it was great fun. I mean, you know, like I said, we went all the time.
Yeah, you had 30, you know, wrestling territories in North America. Now you have the WWE Vince's organization, maybe 2 others, TNA and WCW, I think, is still around.
No, it's bought WCW 2000.
Okay, so
You got Jarrett starting the promotion.
right. So you have 3. You know, Vince's organization is the biggest.
Right.
I don't think you're ever going to get something like this ever again, where you have, you know, the intimacy of the wrestlers and stuff like that. You know, could you kind of talk about how the wrestlers feel about, you know, like Iceman, how he feels about wrestling today? And, you know, it's changed a lot. You know, really.
Oh, yeah.
It's gone from, you know, man sport to style of entertainment.
Yeah, and, you know, a lot of the wrestlers don't like the way it's gone. I mean, even when, you know, we're talking to Johnny Mantell, you know, one of the things, you know, he thinks, you know, the athleticism is great, but he just doesn't like the direction the show's going, because, you know, in some respects it just gets so adult, and there's a lot of kids that still watch wrestling, and, you know, they're watching, you know, wrestlers flip each other off, or women come out half nude, and it's just not, you know, the wrestling that I fell in love with, you know. And I don't even really watch it anymore. I mean, I kind of stopped around 2000 and just went, it's not the same show. But anyway.
What was it like talking to Johnny and them? I mean, being able to talk to wrestlers that you did follow, and I mean, you guys spent so much time in animation, and then you're coming back to something that was a love, even, you know, back.
Yeah, I mean, before I even got into the animation business, I mean, I would spend every Saturday night watching television, which was kind of sad. But I would, you know, I'd watch Laredo, and then I'd watch wrestling, and then. That's true.
That's the whole evening right there.
But, you know, it was great to get to meet those guys, and I mean, you suddenly become a teenager again, you know, and like, wow, this is so awesome. And, you know, I'd ask them, you know, about certain people, and, you know, Iceman, you know, it was amazing, because I just called him up one day. He bought a car at the car lot that my sister-in-law works at, and she said, hey, and she set it all up, and she just gave me his number. I called him. He said, sure, I'll do it. And went out and met him. He's such a great guy.
He was.
I mean, just the nicest guy, and they love telling their stories. I mean, you know, even Johnny Mantell, I mean, he still loves the business. I mean, he's still training guys. Mm-hmm. He's building a ring on his property. He's got all this property in Bowie, Texas, and he's building a ring, and he's going to be training, you know, wrestlers, and they still love it, you know, and after all these years and after everything they've been through, you know, I mean, I didn't talk to, unfortunately, we didn't get to talk to that many, but I've met Kevin Von Erich before, and I've talked to him, and all these guys love this business, and I think they just love the connection they had with the fans and going out, and I'm sure it's, you know, a pretty big power trip to go out and have people massively cheer you or massively boo you. And but you know, I mean, there was an incident with Michael Hayes where a fan got so incensed at him that he took his Polaroid camera, it was hanging from his little strap, and swung it like a nunchuck and cracked his head open and just split him wide open. And you know, and then Jimmy tells the story because Jimmy was there. He said, yeah, and then he's bleeding all over the place. He doesn't get it stitched up, and then he wants to get in my van and go to the liquor store. and he goes in the liquor store covered in blood. I mean, it's just
that's part of their, you know what I mean? It was part of the mystique. They liked that when they were covered in that red. They would, and they wouldn't wash it off for a day or so.
Yeah, they wouldn't wash it. He didn't like take a shower. I mean, he'd go over to Jimmy's that have a party, and he'd be covered in blood and wouldn't take a shower till the next day.
His red badge of courage, you know. I mean,
I think it's a different badge.
Craziness, I guess.
This is premiering at the VideoFest this year. How do you feel about it? You know, premiering here and from the VideoFest, where does it go, and what's the ultimate goal for this film?
Well, I mean, I love the VideoFest. Oh, hi, Bart. I didn't see you.
Nice plug.
And but you know, I've always, and honestly, I honestly do love the VideoFest. They've always been great to me, and I love the programming they have, and but to be able to premiere here is awesome. And then after that, we have a release date when we're going to be for sale on DVD and on VOD, and you know, we're still kind of working a lot of that stuff out. But right now, November 11th is our launch date for selling the DVD and all that. So we're looking forward to it. But you know, we're really excited about the premiere. We're just hoping we sell out.
We hope we sell. That's right.
Yeah.
Anything?
So Keith, I don't know if you asked this because I just answered this. Did anybody ask you how it's different working on a documentary than doing an animated film?
Well, you know, of course, in a lot of ways, this particular documentary is different than other documentaries because so much of it's in the can. You know, I mean, there's just a lot of footage that we were rifling through and we were working with. You know, where a lot of documentaries are more interview driven, ours was a lot more already in the can and, you know, sprinkled with interviews and story time with Jimmy. But, you know, an animated, it's really not that different. I mean, I thought it would be. The storytelling for me, since we handled it almost like an animated film, I mean, the writing style that we used is so silly that it's almost like an animated film, and production is production. I find. I mean, we set here's our budget, here's our schedule, and we're going to be finished by this date, and we did. So it's just getting in there, you know, putting your nose down and getting it done. You know, plowing ahead.
Was it nice to still have, though, a little bit of animation, a little bit of your touch?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, it'd be hard for us to do something and not have some animation in it.
We're both old animators for so long. I don't know if we could do anything that didn't have some of that in there, you know.
Because, you know, it's so much fun to do it, and you know, especially now with, you know, how fast processing is, you can actually do some animation. I mean, where a few years ago we probably couldn't have done nearly as much animation as we did. You know, now with, you know, the processing speeds and the costs of doing animation, and you know, Steve has done animation for so long. Steve really did all the animation in the whole film, and you know, but he would just. It was so funny because it would be the three of us. It'd be our editor, Halal, and myself sitting in the middle, and Steve over here, and we're all in one room, and we're just cutting and animating and cutting and animating and rewriting and cutting, and you know,
It was fun. It really. I don't think I'd ever been quite that close with 3 people in one little tiny space making the film.
I know. We had a lot of fans going.
Yeah, we did. A lot of snacks. We had the snacks right beside of us here.
Yeah, we were constantly bombarded with snacks. So,
but that kept us sugared up so we could keep working.
So we just keep working into the night.
How did Jimmy think about the story time with Jimmy? I thought that was hilarious. What did he
Thank you.
I think he really enjoyed it. I mean,
I wanted more.
Well, you know what? We actually have more, and now we're talking about the ones that we shot that didn't go in the film, releasing them up to the point of the premiere. And but the thing is, you know, it's funny because we massively edited Storytime with Jimmy. Each one of his stories is 20 minutes. And so, you know, his stories would start with, there's the one where he was telling about, you know, meeting the Freebirds for the first time. And how are we doing on time, by the way?
Yeah, no, you're good.
Okay.
Meeting the Freebirds for the first time. And Jimmy telling a story is different than just about anybody I know telling a story. And so he talks about, you know, well, you know, I had an appointment to meet Michael Hayes, and I'm gonna meet him there at 2:00. I show up a little bit early, but I figured it was okay. So I'd go upstairs, and I noticed a penny on one of the steps, and I picked it up, and like, you know, we're just like, land the plane, come on.
He's very detail oriented,
and he remembers all this minutia. And so we're constantly, well, we'll cut all this out, and we'll cut all this out, and we're going to cut all this
But
out.
see, we let him keep talking because in our minds we're cutting.
Just keep going. Yeah, we're cutting as we're watching it. Like, okay, just keep going, and tell stories about Michael Hayes eating the room service food in the halls, and like, just keep telling it. And hey, while you're telling it, why don't you eat a hamburger? And because he was telling stories about Michael Hayes eating hamburgers off the floor.
How disgusting that was.
Because he was
you know.
hungry. It was midnight. He hadn't eaten, and he had been hanging out with David Lee Roth. He's like, we should get something to eat. And he's just going down the hall eating off people's room service trays.
So one of us, it might have been Keith, but we had this, Jimmy had some food nearby. We handed Jimmy a burger while he was talking. He said, go ahead and take a bite while you're talking.
Yeah, and he's telling his story.
How disgusting this is. He takes a bite of the burger.
Yeah, and it's just funny, but his stories every one of them were a minimum 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't want to hear the whole thing.
Yeah, you couldn't.
promise
I don't think you could hear the whole thing. And if you notice on Storytime with Jimmy, we really never let him finish. Because he'll say, and that brought everything to an abrupt halt, and then he just goes, and then we cut. But the story went on. That was not the end of the story. So you know, we just let him go, and you know, the camera batteries would run out. We'd have to, stop, hang on, and we'd change camera batteries and let him go. Okay, the last thing you said was something about eating corn off the floor, so keep going. And
when you cut like 19 minutes out of a 20-minute interview, you know, you have these jump cuts. You know, y'all might have noticed the jump cuts. Well, we decided to play with those as well. So part of the joke became Jimmy shrinking, getting large, turning upside down, head getting bulbous, whatever. And by the way, Jimmy's enjoying it too.
Yeah, he did. I mean, surprisingly, you know, I didn't know where the line was, where he would start getting his feelings hurt or get offended. We never came close to it. It's apparently because he seemed to really enjoy.
He wanted to do more.
He wanted to do more of them as well,
and we may do so. We seem to be getting good feedback on the stories.
Yeah,
the stories by Jimmy. There may be a second sneak disc.
Yeah, we may pitch it as a feature.
Yeah.
No, but it's funny because he's like, and I don't mean this as any disrespect to Charlie Chaplin or anybody like that, but he's almost this Chaplin-esque kind of character.
Disrespect to Charlie.
Jimmy's
okay, you know.
What?
No, go ahead. It's like you don't want to offend Charlie, but what about poor Jim Bob?
But I mean, he has this silent film kind of character to him. I mean, because the way he tells stories, it's so weird and funny.
That's true.
And so we made him black and white, and we distressed, the image, and we did stuff to it that was fun to us, and kind of helped keep the story moving.
It helps tell the story, I think.
What does he do for a living? He seems like a great character. I mean,
That's a good question. Can you answer that? I don't know that answer. We don't know what he does. And that's true.
Is it possibly safer that we don't know?
It might be best.
I don't know. I really wish I knew. I don't know.
And we'll leave it at that. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add?
All I know is if we call him, we might get an answer.
Maybe.
When is your screening?
When is our what?
Our screening,
9 o'clock, October 10th.
10th, right?
At the Alamo Draft House.
At the Alamo Draft House. Yes.
Yes, come dressed in your
wrestling masks. That's right.
I'm going to wear a mask.
Absolutely. I think if you bring a metal chair, or if you're wearing a wrestling mask, or if you have a foreign object in your trunks, you get in free, right, Mark? Is that the way it works?
No. I will have a chair at the door.
You'll be using that.
Okay. Well,
You pay extra.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me, what was that third one?
A foreign object.
in your trunks.
I wanted to emphasize that one.
Yeah, let's go with that one.
Well,